The alien ship Valdris moved silently through the clouds above Earth. Captain Zexthery stood at the main viewing screen, watching the human settlement below. His blue skin reflected the soft light from the ship's controls. Vikelani had been studying humans for 3 weeks now, learning their ways before making contact. "Captain, the atmospheric readings are complete," said Officer Vexco, her long fingers dancing across the control panel. "The humans seem to live in simple structures. Their technology is very basic compared to ours." Zexthery nodded. The Kelani were known across the galaxy for their advanced technology and careful planning. They never rushed into anything. First contact with a new species required months of preparation and study. "Good work," he said. "Continue monitoring their daily activities. We need to understand their culture before we reveal ourselves." The town below was called Cedar Falls. It sat in a valley surrounded by green hills and a winding river. The humans went about their daily tasks, completely unaware that alien eyes watched them from above. Children played in the streets while adults worked in their gardens or drove their primitive vehicles. Science. Officer Nextall looked up from his station with concern. "Captain, I'm detecting something unusual. Long-range sensors show a large object approaching the system." Zexthery walked over to the science station. "What kind of object?" "It appears to be a comet fragment, sir. But it's breaking apart as it enters the atmosphere. The pieces are much larger than normal meteor debris." The captain's eyes widened. This was not good news. "How large are we talking about?" Nextall worked quickly at his controls. "Some fragments are the size of small buildings. The debris field is heading directly toward the human settlement. Impact in approximately 2 hours." A cold feeling spread through Zexthery's chest. This was exactly the kind of disaster the Kelani tried to avoid. Their mission was to study and make peaceful contact, not to watch an entire human town get destroyed. "Can we alter the meteor's path with our weapons?" he asked. "Negative, sir. The field is too large and spread out. Our energy weapons would only break it into smaller pieces, making it more dangerous." Officer Vexco turned from her station. "Captain, our ship can only carry 50 humans at most. The settlement has nearly 2,000 people." Zexthery felt the weight of command pressing down on him. The Kelani had strict rules about interfering with developing civilizations, but watching innocent people die when they could help was against everything he believed in. "Prepare for emergency landing," he ordered. "We'll evacuate as many as we can." The crew worked quickly to prepare the ship for atmospheric entry. The Valdris was designed for space travel, not planetary landings, but it could handle the task. As they descended through the clouds, Zexthery hoped the humans wouldn't panic at the sight of an alien ship down in Cedar Falls. Jake Morrison was working under the hood of an old pickup truck when a shadow fell across the garage. He looked up to see something impossible blocking out the sun. A massive silver ship, smooth and elegant, was settling down in the field just outside town. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake muttered, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He had been fixing cars and machines for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. People began emerging from their houses and shops, pointing at the strange craft. Some screamed and ran away. Others, like Jake, stood and stared in wonder. The ship was beautiful in a way that human technology never was, all flowing curves and seamless metal. Lisa Chong, the local park ranger, was checking the river levels when she heard the commotion. She ran toward the town center and saw the silver ship sitting in Miller's Field. Her training kicked in immediately. As a ranger, she was used to handling emergencies and keeping people calm. "Everyone stay back," she called out, raising her hands. "We don't know what this is yet." But Jake was already walking toward the ship. His curiosity was stronger than his fear. He had always been the type to take things apart to see how they worked. This was just a bigger puzzle than usual. "Jake, don't be stupid," Lisa called after him. "That thing could be dangerous." "Could be," Jake replied without stopping. "But it could also be the most interesting thing that ever happened to this town." A section of the ship's hull began to glow, and then opened like a flower. 3 figures emerged, tall and graceful with blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved carefully, as if they were afraid of frightening the humans. Captain Zexthery stepped forward and raised his hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. The human male approaching them showed no signs of fear, which surprised him. Most species panicked when they first encountered the Kelani. "Greetings," Zexthery said, his voice coming from a small device on his chest that translated his words into English. "I am Captain Zexthery of the Kelani. We come in peace." Jake stopped a few feet away and looked the alien captain up and down. "Well, hello there. I'm Jake Morrison." "Nice ship you got there." The casual response startled Zexthery. He had expected fear, worship, or at least surprise. Instead, this human was treating him like a neighbor who had just arrived for a visit. "We do not have much time," Zexthery said urgently. "A large meteor shower is approaching your settlement. Many people will die if they remain here." More humans were gathering now, forming a loose circle around the aliens. Lisa Chang pushed through the crowd and stood beside Jake. "What kind of meteor shower?" she asked. "Large fragments from a destroyed comet. They will strike this area in less than 2 hours. Our ship can evacuate 50 of your people to safety." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mayor Tom Bradley arrived, breathing hard from running. He was a short, round man who looked completely overwhelmed by the situation. "Did you say meteor shower?" he asked. "How big are we talking about?" Officer Vexco stepped forward. "Some fragments are the size of your buildings. The impact will destroy most of your settlement." The humans began talking among themselves, their voices rising with concern. But Zexthery noticed something odd. Instead of panicking, they seemed to be organizing. People were asking practical questions about timing and trajectory. 50 people? Jake said thoughtfully. "That's not many out of 2,000. "It is all our ship can carry," Zexthery replied. "We are sorry we cannot save more." "Well then," Jake said, "I guess we'll have to figure out another way." The alien captain blinked. In confusion. "Another way? There is no other way? You must evacuate immediately." Lisa Chang was already pulling out her radio. "This is Ranger Chung calling all emergency services. We have a situation at Cedar Falls. I need everyone to respond immediately." "What are you doing?" Zexthery asked. "There is no time for your primitive emergency services," Jake grinned. "Captain, I don't think you understand humans very well. We don't give up that easy. Tom, you better call a town meeting. We got some planning to do." Mayor Bradley nodded and hurried away to ring the emergency bell. Within minutes, people were streaming toward the town hall from all directions. The Kelani watched in amazement as the humans organized themselves with impressive speed. "They're not accepting evacuation," Officer Vexco observed. "This is highly unusual behavior." "Indeed," Zexthery replied. "Most species would be fighting over the limited spots on our ship. These humans seem to think they have other options." As the crowd headed toward the town hall, Jake turned back to the alien captain. "You coming? We could use someone who knows." About meteors, Zexthery looked at his crew. They had trained for many possible first contact scenarios, but this was not one of them. The humans were treating a deadly disaster like a problem to be solved rather than a fate to be accepted. "Very well," he said. "We will attend your meeting. But I must warn you, there is very little time." "Time enough," Jake replied confidently. "You'd be surprised what people can do when they put their minds to it." As they walked toward the town hall, Zexthery wondered if he was about to witness something remarkable or something tragic. In his experience, most species had limits to what they could accomplish. But these humans seemed to believe they had no limits at all. The town hall filled quickly as people pushed through the doors. Captain Zexthery and his crew followed Jake Morrison and Lisa Chang inside. The building was old and simple, with wooden floors and rows of folding chairs. Nothing like the sleek meeting rooms on Kelani ships. Mayor Tom Bradley stood at the front, his face red with stress. "Everyone please sit down. We have a serious situation here." The room buzzed with nervous energy. Children sat with their parents while older residents whispered among themselves. Some people stared at the 3 blue-skinned aliens with wide eyes. Others seemed more worried about the meteor shower than the visitors from space. "These are our new friends from space?" Tom began awkwardly. "They have some bad news about meteors coming our way." Captain Zek's theory stepped forward. His translation device crackled as he spoke. "Citizens of Cedar Falls, I must be direct. Large. Meteors will strike your town in 90 minutes. My ship can save 50 people. The rest will face certain death." The room erupted in voices. People shouted questions and concerns. Some parents held their children tighter. But Jake Morrison noticed something the aliens missed. Nobody was rushing toward the door. Nobody was fighting to claim a spot on the alien ship. Hold on," Jake called out, raising his hands. "Let's think about this clearly. Captain, tell us more about these meteors. How big are they exactly?" Zexthery looked confused by the question. "Does it matter? They are large enough to destroy your buildings and kill your people." "Everything matters," said Dr. Susan Wright, standing up in the third row. She was a retired engineer who had moved to Cedar Falls 5 years ago. Size, speed, composition, angle of impact. All of these things affect how we can protect ourselves. Officer Vexco stepped forward. "The largest fragments are approximately 30 meters across. They will impact at roughly 20 kilometers per second. The smaller pieces will arrive first, followed by the larger ones." Susan nodded and pulled out a small notebook. "What about the composition? Are they metallic or rocky?" "Mostly ice and stone with some metallic elements," Nextall replied. "But I do not understand why this information is important. Your structures cannot withstand such impacts." "Maybe not," Jake said with a grin. "But we won't know until we try." "Susan, what do you think?" The old engineer was already sketching in her notebook. 30 meters isn't impossible to defend against. We need mass and angles. Something to deflect and absorb the impact energy." Lisa Chung stood up. "We have the old quarry with lots of stone blocks. There's also the junkyard with metal scraps and old cars." "The landfill has tons of material too," added Pete Davis, the local contractor. "Tires, concrete chunks, steel beams from the old factory." Captain Zexthery watched this exchange with growing amazement. These humans were treating an extinction-level event like a construction project. "You cannot be serious." "No, primitive. Materials can protect you from such forces." "Primitive?" Jake laughed. "Captain, I've been building things my whole life. Sometimes the simplest materials work better than fancy ones." Mayor Bradley cleared his throat. "Folks, maybe we should consider the aliens' offer. 50 people is better than nobody." "And who decides which 50? Asked Martha Kelly, the school principal. "Who gets to live while everyone else dies?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Kelani had expected this problem. Most species fought over limited rescue spots. But these humans seemed to be rejecting the entire concept. "We all live or we all die together," said Frank Cooper, the fire chief. "That's how we do things in Cedar Falls." "That is illogical," Officer Vexco said. "Some survival is better than total death." "Maybe for you," Lisa replied. "But we're not. Leaving our neighbors behind, Jake walked over to the aliens. "Captain, tell me about your ship's shields. Could they protect a larger area?" Zexthery shook his head. "Our shields are designed for space operations. They would fail in your atmosphere under meteor bombardment." "What if we modified them somehow, combined them with ground-based protection?" "Impossible. Our technology is not compatible with your primitive systems." Jake grinned again. "Captain, you keep using that word. I don't think you understand what humans can do with primitive systems." Dr. Wright looked up from her notebook. "Jake's right. We don't need perfect protection. We just need to survive long enough for the shower to pass." "How long will the bombardment last?" Lisa asked. "Approximately 45 minutes, Nextall replied. "The debris field is quite large." 45 minutes, Pete Davis repeated. "We can build something to last 45 minutes. The aliens looked at each other in disbelief. These humans were talking about constructing meteor-proof shelters in less than 90 minutes. Even Kelani engineering teams would need weeks to design such structures. You do not understand the forces involved, Zexthery said firmly. Each impact will be like a powerful bomb. Your buildings will be crushed like paper. Then we don't build buildings, Jake said. We build bunkers. Underground, reinforced with multiple layers of protection. The town has storm drains and utility. Tunnels, Lisa added. We could connect them and reinforce the connections. The old mine shaft is still accessible, said Bill Turner, who had worked there before it closed. Goes down about 50 feet and runs under most of the town. Susan Wright was writing furiously now. We need shock-absorbing materials. Something that can handle multiple impacts without breaking. Car tires, Jake said immediately. Thousands of them at the dump. Stack them up and fill them with sand or concrete. Old mattresses for cushioning, added Sarah Miller, who ran the local thrift store. We have dozens in storage. The aliens watched in fascination as the humans began organizing themselves. People were volunteering for different tasks without being asked. Some would gather materials, others would handle construction, and still others would manage food and medical supplies. This is remarkable, Vexco whispered to her captain. They're treating this like a community project. It is foolish, Zexthery replied, but his voice lacked conviction. They will all die for their stubbornness. Mayor Bradley was making lists on a large whiteboard. We need teams for material gathering, construction, and shelter management. Children and elderly get priority in the deepest shelters. I'll take the construction team, Pete Davis volunteered. We'll need welders, carpenters, and anyone who can handle heavy equipment. I'll coordinate material gathering, Jake said. We need to strip everything useful from the junkyard, the quarry, and the landfill. Lisa Chong raised her hand. I'll handle logistics and communications. We need to stay coordinated during the bombardment. Captain Zexthery found himself impressed despite his skepticism. The humans were organizing faster than most military units he had seen. Everyone seemed to know their role without being told. Captain, Dr. Wright said, approaching the alien leader, would you be willing to share technical data about the meteors? Trajectory, impact timing, things like that? Of course, Zexthery replied, but I still believe evacuation is your only hope, and I believe you're about to see what humans can do when they're backed into a corner, Jake said, clapping the alien on the shoulder. The gesture surprised Zexthery. Physical contact between strangers was rare among his people, but the humans' touch was friendly, confident, and somehow reassuring. All right, everyone, Mayor Bradley called out. We have about 70 minutes left. Let's get to work. The humans began filing out of the hall, talking in small groups about their assignments. The aliens followed, still trying to process what they had witnessed. They're actually going to try this, Vexco said in amazement. Yes, Zexthery replied, and I'm beginning to think we should help them. Outside, the humans were already moving with purpose. Trucks were starting up, tools were being gathered, and people were heading toward the various material sources around town. The aliens had expected panic and desperation. Instead, they found determination and hope. Jake Morrison looked back at the alien captain. You coming, Captain? We could use someone who knows about structural engineering. Zexthery looked at his crew, then at the humans preparing to do the impossible. Very well, but I want it recorded that I believe this plan will fail, noted. Jake grinned. But I want it recorded that I believe you're about to learn something about human engineering. As they walked toward the first construction site, Zexthery wondered if these humans were brave or simply insane. He was beginning to suspect they might be both. The town of Cedar Falls transformed into a hive of activity within minutes. Jake Morrison stood at the entrance to the old landfill, looking at mountains of discarded materials with new eyes. What the aliens saw as worthless trash, he saw as building blocks for survival. Pete, bring the crane over here, Jake called out to the contractor. We need to move these concrete blocks first. Pete Davis maneuvered the heavy equipment between piles of debris. Behind them, a convoy of trucks waited to haul materials to the construction sites. The aliens watched from a safe distance as humans swarmed over the landfill like ants on a mission. "This is chaotic," Officer Vexco observed. "There is no clear plan or organization." "Look closer," Captain Zexthery replied. He was beginning to see patterns in the apparent chaos. Each human seemed to know exactly what they were doing, even. Without detailed instructions, Jake pulled a rusty car door from a pile of scrap metal. "Susan, will this work for the outer layer?" Dr. Wright examined the door, checking its thickness and condition. "Perfect. The curve will help deflect impacts. We need about 200 more like this." "You got it," Jake said, then turned to a group of teenagers. "Boys, start pulling car doors, hoods, and trunk lids. Stack them by size over there." The young people dove into the work with enthusiasm. They treated the emergency like an adventure rather than a disaster. Captain Zexthery found their attitude remarkable. Most species would be paralyzed by fear in such a situation. At the old quarry, Lisa Chang was coordinating the collection of stone blocks. Workers used heavy machinery to load massive chunks of limestone onto flatbed trucks. The blocks were weathered and rough, but they would provide excellent mass for absorption. "How much do we need?" asked one of the workers. "All of it," Lisa replied. "Every block, every piece of gravel, every chunk of broken concrete. We're building multiple layers of protection." Meanwhile, at the town's junkyard, another team was dismantling old vehicles. They worked with tools and equipment that looked primitive to the aliens but functioned with surprising efficiency. Welders cut through metal frames while others sorted useful components. "These engines are too heavy to move quickly," said mechanic Roy Adams. "But the engine blocks would make good anchor points for the shelter frames." "Good thinking," replied electrician Nancy Foster. "We can wire them together with the steel cables from the old grain elevator." The aliens followed the human teams, trying to understand their methods. What puzzled them most was how the humans could make instant decisions about complex engineering problems without computer calculations or detailed planning. "How do they know what will work?" Science Officer Nextall asked his captain. "Experience," Zexthery realized. "They have been building and fixing things their entire lives. They understand materials in ways our computers cannot calculate." At the main construction site near the town center, the shelter was taking shape with incredible speed. The humans had chosen a location over the old mine tunnel system, giving them a natural underground foundation. Above ground, they were building a layered defense system. The first layer consisted of old tires filled with sand and concrete. Workers rolled the heavy tires into position and stacked them in overlapping patterns. The rubber would absorb impact energy while the sand and concrete provided mass and stability. "This is actually quite clever," Officer Vexco admitted. "The curved surfaces will deflect debris rather than taking direct hits." Above the tire layer, the humans were installing a framework of steel beams salvaged from demolished buildings. The beams formed a grid pattern that would distribute impact forces across a wide area instead of concentrating them in single points. Dr. Wright directed the placement of each beam with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. That one needs to angle 15 degrees to the left. The load path needs to flow toward the support columns. Jake was amazed by how quickly the retired engineer had adapted to working with salvaged materials. "Susan, how did you figure out the angles so fast?" "Same principles as any building," she replied. "Force follows the path of least resistance. We just need to give it the right path to follow." The aliens watched as humans continued to arrive with more materials. Cars pulled trailers loaded with old appliances, broken furniture, and construction debris. Everything was being incorporated into the shelter design. "Captain," Nextall said, "their approach is completely different from ours. We would design the perfect solution and build it exactly as planned. They are adapting their design to use whatever materials they can find." "And it seems to be working," Zexthery admitted reluctantly. The second layer of protection consisted of car bodies welded together in overlapping patterns. The humans had removed the engines and other heavy components, leaving just the steel shells. Welders worked rapidly, their torches creating showers of sparks in the afternoon light. "These cars are built to absorb crash energy," explained mechanic Danny Torres. "Same principle should work for meteor impacts." Above the car layer, workers were installing sheets of metal roofing, door panels, and other flat surfaces. They overlapped the sheets like scales on a fish, creating a surface that would deflect rather than absorb impacts. "The angle is crucial," Dr. Wright explained to the aliens. "Too steep and the meteors will just bounce off and hit something else. Too shallow and they'll punch right through." The final layer was the most creative. The humans had collected old mattresses, cushions, and padding from furniture and cars. They wrapped these soft materials in tarps and plastic sheeting, creating a cushioned surface that would absorb the final impact energy. "This is genius," Lisa Chung said, watching workers secure the padding. Multiple layers, each designed to handle a different aspect of the impact. But the surface shelter was only part of the plan. Underground, teams were working to expand and reinforce the old mine tunnels. They used timber salvaged from demolished buildings to shore up the tunnel walls and create safe spaces for people to wait out the bombardment. "The tunnel system connects to the storm drains," explained former miner Bill Turner. "We can move people between different areas if one section gets damaged." The aliens followed the humans into the tunnels, impressed by the extensive underground network. The tunnels were crude but functional, with multiple exit points and storage areas for supplies. "How long have these tunnels existed?" Captain X3 asked. "The mine closed 30 years ago," Bill replied. "But we've been using parts of it for storage and maintenance access. Every town has hidden spaces like this." As the afternoon wore on, the shelter began to look like a bizarre sculpture made from the town's discarded materials. But the aliens could see the engineering logic behind the chaotic appearance. Each layer served a specific purpose, and the entire structure was designed to flex and bend rather than break. Jake climbed to the top of the structure to check the final layer installation. From up there, he could see the alien ship in the distance, sleek and perfect in the afternoon sunlight. It was beautiful, but it looked fragile compared to the massive, ugly shelter his people had built. "Jake," Dr. Wright called from below, "we need to test the communication system." The humans had installed a network of radios and speakers throughout the shelter and tunnel system. They used equipment salvaged from old cars, broken electronics, and amateur radio equipment. The system looked like a mess of wires and components, but it worked. "Testing, testing," Jake spoke into a handheld radio. His voice echoed from speakers throughout the underground network. "All stations, please respond," voices crackled back from different areas of the shelter. People reported their positions, supply levels, and readiness status. The aliens realized the humans had created a command and control system using nothing but scrap electronics. "How is this possible?" Vexco asked. "Our computers could not coordinate such a complex system." "We don't need computers," replied electrician Nancy Foster. "We just need to talk to each other." As the sun began to set, the shelter was nearly complete. The humans had worked for 6 hours straight, transforming tons of waste materials into a layered defense system that impressed even the skeptical aliens. Captain X3 stood with Jake at the entrance to the main tunnel. "I must admit, your people have accomplished something remarkable, but I still fear it will not be enough." Jake looked at the strange structure his neighbors had built. It was ugly and crude, held together with welds, bolts, and determination. But it was theirs, and it represented everything he loved about human ingenuity. "Captain," he said, "you're about to learn that sometimes the best solutions come from the worst materials." In the distance, the first meteors began to streak across the darkening sky. The first meteors appeared as bright streaks across the evening sky. They looked beautiful, like falling stars making wishes come true, but Jake Morrison knew better. Those pretty lights were harbingers of destruction racing toward his town at incredible speed. "Everyone into the shelters now," Lisa Shang announced over the radio network. Her voice echoed from speakers throughout Cedar Falls. "This is not a drill. Move quickly, but don't panic. Families hurried toward the main shelter and the smaller emergency bunkers scattered around town. Children carried stuffed animals and favorite toys while parents grabbed emergency supplies. The aliens watched as nearly 2,000 people organized themselves without chaos or fighting. Remarkable discipline, Officer Vexco observed. Most species would be trampling each other to reach safety first. Captain Zexthery nodded as he followed Jake toward the main shelter entrance. The structure looked even more bizarre up close. Layers of tires, car bodies, metal sheets, and padding created a mountain of salvaged materials that defied every engineering principle he knew. "Are you certain this will hold?" he asked Jake as they descended into the tunnel system. "Nope," Jake replied cheerfully. "But it's what we got, so it'll have to do." The underground network buzzed with activity as people found their assigned spaces. Families gathered in reinforced chambers while emergency teams took positions at communication stations. Battery-powered lights cast strange shadows on the rough tunnel walls. Dr. Susan Wright sat at a makeshift command center, monitoring stress sensors the humans had improvised from car parts and electronic components. "Oh. Stations report ready," she announced. "Structural integrity looks good." Above ground, the alien ship Valdris had extended its energy shields to protect the immediate landing area. The shields created a shimmering dome of blue light that covered about 50 acres, but the rest of Cedar Falls lay exposed to the coming bombardment. The small meteors arrived first, striking the ground like gunshots. They hit the outer areas of town, smashing through roof tiles and punching holes in walls. The impact sent vibrations through the ground that the people in the shelters could feel in their bones. "Here they come," Pete Davis reported from an observation post near the tunnel entrance. "Small ones first, just like the aliens predicted." The radio network crackled with reports from spotters positioned around town. 3 impacts on Main Street. 1 hit the old gas station. "Fire department is responding?" "Copy that," Lisa replied from the command center. "Fire Team Beta, you're clear to move." Captain Zexthery listened to the calm, professional communications with amazement. The humans were treating the Meteor bombardment like any other emergency, coordinating responses and sharing information without panic. The medium-sized meteors came next, striking with thunderous booms that shook the entire shelter. The first one hit the outer layer of tires, sending sand and rubber flying in all directions. But the tire absorbed most of the impact energy and the steel framework beneath held firm. "Direct hit on Section 3, reported a spotter. "The tire layer took most of it. Some debris scattered, but the main structure is intact." Jake grinned from his position near the command center. "Told you those tires would work." Another meteor struck the car body layer with a tremendous crash. The welded vehicles buckled and twisted, but they held together and deflected the debris away from the shelter's main structure. Sparks flew as metal scraped against metal, but the overlapping design prevented any single impact from causing catastrophic damage. "The deflection is working perfectly," Dr. Wright reported, watching her improvised instruments. "The curved surfaces are sending the debris away from us instead of straight down." In the tunnel system, children huddled close to their parents, while teenagers helped distribute water and snacks. The elderly sat in the most protected areas, sharing stories to keep everyone's spirits up. Nobody complained about the cramped conditions or the rough accommodations. Officer Vexco marveled at the human behavior. "They are actually calm. Our species would be in complete panic by now. They trust their neighbors," Captain Zexthery realized. "Every person here helped build this shelter. They know exactly how it was constructed and why it should work." The largest meteors began falling now, massive chunks of ice and stone that hit with the force of bombs. The first giant meteor struck the metal sheet layer, tearing through several panels before being caught by the padding beneath. The impact sent shockwaves through the entire structure. Underground, the tunnel walls creaked and groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling as the mountain of salvaged materials above them absorbed and distributed the tremendous forces. But the shelter held together, flexing and bending instead of breaking. "Stress levels are within acceptable limits, Dr. Wright announced. The flexible design is working exactly as planned. Another massive meteor hit dead center on the shelter, striking all the layers in sequence. The tires compressed and split, the car bodies crumpled and twisted, the metal sheets bent and tore, and the padding compressed almost flat. But each lay absorbed some of the energy, and the tunnel system beneath remained intact. That was a big one, Jake said, feeling the vibration through the ground. But we're still here. The bombardment continued for what felt like hours but was actually only 30 minutes. Meteors of all sizes hammered the town and surrounding area, but the main shelter deflected or absorbed every impact. The smaller emergency bunkers around town also held up, protecting families who couldn't reach the main facility throughout. The bombardment, the radio network kept everyone connected. People reported their status, shared updates about damage, and even told jokes to keep morale up. The communication system, built from scrap electronics, worked flawlessly under conditions that would challenge military equipment. All stations, sound off, Lisa called during a brief lull in the impacts. Report your status. Voices crackled back from throughout the tunnel network and the smaller shelters around town. Tunnel Section Alpha, all good here. Emergency Bunker 7, no problems. Fire Team Charlie, standing by. Captain Zexthery listened to the reports with growing amazement. Not only had the humans survived impacts that should have destroyed their crude shelters, but they had maintained perfect communication and coordination throughout the disaster. The final wave of meteors was the most intense. Giant chunks of ice and rock fell like rain, striking the ground with impacts that could be felt for miles. The shelter's outer layers were battered and torn, but the underlying structure continued to hold. One massive meteor, easily the size of a small building, struck the shelter's edge. The impact was so powerful it knocked people off their feet. In the tunnels below, for a moment, everyone held their breath, waiting to see if their improvised fortress would finally collapse, but the shelter held. The layered design had distributed the impact across the entire structure, and the flexible materials had bent without breaking. Chunks of debris scattered in all directions, but the tunnel system remained secure. That was the big one, Pete Davis reported from his observation post. If we survive that, we can survive anything. As the bombardment began to fade, the humans started emerging from their protected positions to assess the damage. The shelter looked like it had been through a war, with layers torn, twisted, and scattered. But it had done its job, protecting nearly 2,000 people from certain death. Jake climbed up through the tunnel entrance and looked at the wreckage of his town's improvised fortress. It was completely destroyed, but it was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Because behind all that twisted metal and scattered debris, his people were alive. "Captain," he called to Zexthery, who was emerging from the tunnel behind him. "I told you we'd figure something out." The alien captain looked at the destroyed shelter, then at the humans who were already beginning to organize cleanup and rescue operations. They had faced impossible odds with primitive materials and somehow emerged victorious. "Yes," Zexthery said quietly, "you certainly did." As dawn broke over Cedar Falls, the true extent of their achievement became clear. They had not just survived, they had proven that determination and ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. The morning sun shone down on a changed Cedar Falls. Craters dotted the landscape where meteors had struck. Several buildings had been damaged or destroyed. But the town was alive, and nearly every person had survived the night that should have killed them all. Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of their improvised shelter, kicking at pieces of twisted metal and torn padding. The structure was completely wrecked, but it had served its purpose. Around him, neighbors emerged from the tunnel system, blinking in the bright morning light. "Well, that was exciting," said Dr. Susan Wright, brushing dust from her clothes. Despite spending the night underground, she looked remarkably calm. "I'd say our engineering experiment was a success." Captain Zexthery climbed out of the tunnel behind her, his blue skin pale with exhaustion and amazement. His crew followed, looking around at the destruction with new eyes. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about technology and survival. This should not have been possible, Officer Vexco said quietly. The forces involved should have crushed any structure built from such materials. Should have, Jake agreed, picking up a bent piece of car door. But sometimes should have doesn't matter much. What matters is what actually happens. All around them, the people of Cedar Falls were already organizing cleanup efforts. Families checked on neighbors, volunteers distributed food and water, and repair crews assessed damage to essential services. The response was swift and efficient without any central authority directing the effort. Lisa Chang appeared with a clipboard and radio, coordinating the emergency response with the same calm competence she had shown during the crisis. Medical teams report only minor injuries. Fire department has contained 3 small fires. Water and power should be restored. By this afternoon, how many casualties? Captain Zexthery asked, dreading the answer. None, Lisa replied simply. A few cuts and bruises, 1 sprained ankle, but nobody died. The alien captain felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. By every calculation his science team had made, at least half the human population should have perished. Instead, they had achieved 0 casualties using materials his people would have considered worthless. I don't understand, Science Officer Nextall said, examining the wreckage of the shelter. These materials have no structural integrity. They should have failed immediately under such stress. Dr. Wright overheard and walked over to the confused alien. That's where you're wrong. These materials have exactly the right kind of structural integrity. They're designed to fail in controlled ways. She picked up a piece of tire rubber and stretched it between her hands. This tire was made to absorb impact energy in car crashes. When a meteor hit it, it did exactly what it was designed to do. It absorbed energy and failed safely. But failure means the structure is destroyed, Nextall protested. Failure of individual components, Jake corrected. The overall system survived because we expected parts of it to break. That's why we built so many layers. Captain Zexthery began to see the brilliance of the human approach. The Kelani built things to last forever, using perfect materials and precise engineering. But the humans had built something designed to be destroyed in the process of saving lives. Your philosophy is completely different from ours, he realized. We build to prevent failure. You build to manage failure. Exactly, Dr. Wright said with a smile. We know things will break, so we plan for it. Multiple backups, redundant systems, materials that fail safely instead of catastrophically. Mayor Tom Bradley arrived with a team of volunteers ready to begin clearing the debris. But instead of just cleaning up, Jake and several others were already planning how to reuse the salvaged materials. These car bodies are still good for construction, Pete Davis observed. We could use them for storm shelters or emergency housing for folks whose homes got damaged. The tire rubber can be shredded and used for playground surfaces, added Nancy Foster. The steel framework could become part of a new community center. The aliens watched in fascination as the humans immediately began transforming disaster debris into resources for rebuilding. Nothing was wasted, and every piece of wreckage was seen as potential building material for future projects. They're already planning the next construction project, Vexco observed. Do they ever stop building things? That's what humans do, Lisa explained. We see problems as opportunities to build solutions. Last night we had a meteor problem, so we built a meteor shelter. Today we have a debris problem, so we'll build something useful from the debris. Captain Zexthery found himself thinking about his own species and their approach to challenges. The Kelani would spend months studying the debris, analyzing its properties, and designing the perfect reuse strategy. The humans were already moving pieces around and making plans based on intuition and experience. Captain, Jake said, approaching. With a twisted piece of steel beam? I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About your ship's shields not working in atmosphere. Yes, they are designed for space operations only. What if we could modify them? Combine your energy. Projection with our materials engineering? Zexthery shook his head automatically. Impossible. Our technology is not compatible with primitive materials, Jake grinned. Captain, you keep saying that word. I'm starting to think you don't know what it means. Dr. Wright joined the conversation, her engineering mind already working on the problem. Energy shields need to dissipate heat and absorb impact forces. What if we created hybrid systems that use both energy projection and physical materials? The energy field could handle the initial impact, Pete added, while physical barriers absorb and redirect the remaining force. Captain X3 felt his scientific worldview shifting again. The humans were proposing to combine advanced alien technology with salvaged Earth materials. It was exactly the kind of impossible solution they had used to survive the meteor shower. You want to integrate our technology with your scrap metal, he said slowly. Why not? Jake replied, your energy is precise and efficient. Our materials are tough and adaptable. Together they might be better than either one alone. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Wright's granddaughter. 8-year-old Emma, she had been helping in the emergency shelter all night and now carried a small alien communication device that someone had given her. Grandma, the space people's radio is making funny noises, she said, handing over the device. Nextel took the device and examined it with concern. This is receiving a transmission from our mothership. They are requesting an immediate status report. Captain X3 realized he would need to explain the night's events to his superiors. How could he describe what he had witnessed? How could he make them understand that these apparently primitive humans had achieved something the Kelani considered impossible? What will you tell them? Jake asked. The truth, X3 replied, that we have encountered a species whose approach to engineering is completely different from our own and possibly superior in ways we never considered. Lisa Chang looked up from her clipboard. Captain, you and your crew are welcome to stay and help with the rebuilding. We could use your technical knowledge and you might learn something about human engineering methods. The alien captain looked around at the bustling activity, the cheerful determination, and the incredible resilience of these remarkable humans. His mission had been to make peaceful contact and assess human civilization. He had discovered something far more valuable than he had ever expected. We would be honored to stay and learn, he said formally. Then, in a more human gesture he was beginning to understand, he smiled. And perhaps we can teach you a few things about energy projection systems. Jake clapped him on the shoulder again, the friendly human gesture that was becoming familiar. Captain, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership. As the day progressed, humans and aliens worked side by side, clearing debris and planning reconstruction projects. The Kelani learned about adaptive engineering and resourceful problem-solving, while the humans discovered the precision and elegance of advanced energy systems. By evening, the first hybrid human-alien structure was taking shape. It combined Kelani energy projection with human materials engineering, creating something neither species could have built alone. The project became a symbol of what could be achieved when different approaches to problem-solving came together. Captain X3 stood with Jake watching the sunset over their transformed town. Cedar Falls would be rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than before. But more importantly, two very different species had learned to see the universe through each other's eyes. Jake, the captain said, I believe my people have much to learn from yours. And we've got plenty to learn from you, Jake replied. But I think we're going to figure it out together, one piece of junk at a time. Above them, the stars came out, no longer looking like harbingers of destruction, but like promises of adventure in a universe full of possibilities.